Newest solutions and applications, proven best practices, strategies, and insights all around industrial automation. That is what Automation Fair here in Chicago is all about. Good afternoon. We are live streaming on the YouTube. We are the Tech Ed Podcast. I am the host of that podcast, Matt Kirkner, and we have had invigorating conversations all morning long, now getting well into the afternoon of the 2 days here of Automation Fair at McCormick Place in Chicago, Illinois. And we are really excited about our next guest. It's a company, he represents a company that is going to be familiar to, I'm going to say just about every single one of our listeners, Enrique Herrera. Enrique is the Director of Industry Solutions Automotive at Microsoft. So Director of Industry Solutions Automotive at Microsoft. Enrique, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
So obviously everybody is familiar with Microsoft, right? Everybody knows Microsoft. Everybody uses Microsoft. When we think about technology, when we think about automation, when we think about software on the industrial side of business, maybe a little bit less so, but Microsoft has a huge presence in the world of industry, does it not? And so can you give us some examples of, within your own division of automotive industrial solutions, what is the role that Microsoft plays in the world of advanced manufacturing?
Well, thank you for the question. I guess yes. I guess when I started back my career, right, understanding that Microsoft is kind of enterprise IT technology,
right?
I had the similar questions.
Yeah.
But as I've become more and more familiar with the capabilities, there is a lot of application with some of the digital technologies, a lot of the data technologies that are now more and more relevant as we see that convergence between the operational environment and the IT environment.
Absolutely.
So therefore, the data discussion is paramount in terms of getting that, unlocking that value in the operations.
Yeah, so it really is about this IT-OT convergence for our listeners who I think most of whom are familiar with those terms, but information technology and then operations technology. And it used to be that those two areas in a business were really, really divided. I spent 23 years running advanced manufacturing companies. And back in those days, you had an IT team, you had an OT team, and never the two shall meet, right? They wanted nothing to do with each other.
Right.
You know, if IT was coming out to the shop floor, you wanted to get the question answered as quickly as possible and move them out of the way. And then the same thing on the operations side. Most of the IT folks love their networks and their managed and unmanaged switches and their software and so on. But, you know, get them around a CNC machine or around a conveyor or a industrial robot, and it was like, wait, that's the OT people. Well, that's not the world that we're living in anymore, in large part because of this data that's driving so many decisions and best practices in manufacturing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing that with enterprise customers, the ones that are successful in these transformations that have these blurred teams between the operational and the IT. They may be referred to as digital engineering teams. They may live in either part of the organization, but they definitely have both sides represented. And it's two areas divided by the common language. The example I like to use in a little more technical detail is you'll use terminology in OT that means something different on the IT side.
Right.
So if I ask you, what does the edge mean?
Right.
Well, to the automation guys here, we're talking about the sensors and closer to the machine.
Right.
When you talk to somebody in IT, they think the factory is the edge. And it kind of breaks my heart.
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, but we're moving into an age when they're not going to be able to just stop at that edge of the factory door, and they've got to be fully committed and fully on board. I worked on a project about 2 years ago with a major Fortune 100 company, and it was the head of that IT team that came to us and said, look, our IT folks are getting pulled out onto the shop floor, and they're being asked questions about connectivity, about sensors and devices out on the manufacturing edge being connected to the internet, getting lots of questions about cybersecurity, making sure that we're understanding, okay, our plant isn't air-gapped the way that it was 15 or 20 years ago. Now everything is connected to the internet, and even unknowingly, in some cases, somebody could accidentally be letting the secret sauce, the IP of the manufacturing process out the door. And so we need to have the IT people really, really involved on the whole operations transformation, and it sounds like you're right at the heart of that, right in the middle of that. So it's a really, really exciting time for manufacturing, and it sounds like a really exciting time for Microsoft, and I understand you spent quite a bit of time on the manufacturing side with Visteon and then moved your way over to Microsoft some time ago. And I want to dig a little bit deeper into a number of different things. One of them is the strategic partnership with Rockwell Automation. Enrique, as much as we're here at Automation Fair, one of my favorite shows of the year, by the way. I mean, just the energy here, the amount of people that are coming by the booth, waving at us, saying hello, really fascinated by the guests that we're having, and certainly you're no exception to the high caliber of people that have been joining us all day here at Automation Fair. So tell us about the partnership between Rockwell Automation and Microsoft, and how your solutions in the industrial side actually complement a lot of the solutions available from Rockwell.
Yeah, absolutely. What I really like is that coming to this show, again, one of my favorite shows, Rockwell's kind of evolved from the hardware and industrial control side in evolving into the information side,
right,
and understanding that data is a little different than traditional enterprise data. So therefore, some of the workloads can happen locally on the machines, right? We see that computing capability getting stronger. But when they start looking at some of the multi-site discussions and they start looking at heavier workloads, then this is where the cloud computing piece comes in. And you start to see the handshake of the operational data kind of moving into enterprise-grade IT infrastructure type of environments. So our solutions kind of play on that, whether it's our edge technologies to help get the data in there, or it's help organizing the data, or the advanced analytics capabilities that are, kind of broad capabilities. But you see, Rockwell Automation taking that back down into kind of inference back at the edge discussions, where they can start doing anomaly detection and things like that. So now you're seeing that IT/OT convergence going in two directions. And I think that's where our partnership is strong.
Very cool. So the IT/OT convergence going in two directions, thus the partnership between Microsoft and Rockwell. I think what we're seeing in the world of manufacturing, especially from an engineering standpoint, is just it's already starting to blow people's minds. Certainly mine. And I joke about I spent 23 years running as chief executive of Midwest U.S. manufacturing companies, and what would happen is we would say, all right, we need to improve fill in the blank. We need to improve this process. We need to improve yield. We need to improve cycle time. We need to improve throughput. Whatever it was we were improving. And you'd get everybody and put them around a circle on the shop floor and start talking about the problem. Almost immediately you realize you don't have enough data to solve the problem. So then we go find somebody, and again, this is 15, 20 years ago, you'd find somebody called an industrial engineer. You'd hand them a clipboard and a calculator and say, watch that production line for the next 2 days and gather as much data as you can. And then you'd finally, after a day, a week, a month, whatever, finally have enough data to be able to start to even analyze what problem you're trying to solve, much less solve that problem. Now we're moving into this age where, with the availability of smart sensors and smart devices, literally the ability to measure almost anything, at the point of production in real time, gather that data. The problem anymore isn't the amount of data that we have and figuring out how we get enough data to solve the problem. The problem is having so much data that now we have to discern what is that actionable, I call it actionable data, right? What's that data that we can actually take and put to work and solve a problem with versus the sea of data that maybe isn't relevant? Totally different world. I know you spent a lot of time in advanced manufacturing. Are you seeing that evolution the same way? Absolutely.
I was gonna tell a story about. I started my career actually in the product engineering and automotive, manufacturing, engineering, running production.
Okay.
And when I crossed over into IT, and this was around 2000, so I'm kind of dating myself.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I'm like, I'm going to go solve these manufacturing problems. I'm going to work with these IT folk, and we're going to go solve these problems. But what I realized was I was solving business problems and creating IT problems.
Interesting. Give me an example.
So in terms of solutions, right, in terms of selecting an independent software vendor solution, or custom developing a solution for one plant, and then saying, okay, well, how do I get that to run in other plants? Well, I should just lift and shift and drop it in there. But wait a minute, the physical infrastructure is different, right, in that plant. Wait a minute, how do I govern this so that I keep them in sync? How do I keep the back-end IT infrastructure in line so that I'm not running on kind of Windows, so an old version of SQL or something, right? And so those are the problems I created.
Yeah, right, absolutely. And then had to go on and solve those types of problems as well. And I think, as you look, it's easy for the OT folks to to point at IT and saying that's where the problem is. It's easy for the IT people to point at the OT folks and say that's where the problem is. And I'm sure the two of us in our careers have seen plenty of that. And the truth of the matter is that it's the two of those parts of the organization progressing together towards solutions for the overall benefit of the organization is where we're going to see this. And we think about jobs like a digitization engineer or something like that, the types of engineers that are bringing the IT and the OT side together and putting them to work in manufacturing. That's where the really exciting time is going to be, I think, in the coming years. I have a daughter, as a matter of fact, who's a data science major in college. One of the things I insisted on with both of my kids was, you can do whatever you want for a career, but Dad made his entire career in the world of manufacturing. You're going to spend some time in manufacturing, and then you can do whatever you want. My son worked in a metal forge shop for several years while he was working his way through what came after secondary. Daughter is a data science major, worked in a machining company last summer, right? That was her internship. So she went to work in an advanced manufacturing environment, taking the IT side of data science and putting it to work, working with a team of people that were teaching her how to do that, as a matter of fact, in the manufacturing environment. So I think if there's a theme for our discussion this morning, or this afternoon rather, it's really all about how these careers are really going to get blurred over the course of time. I know you have a partnership that is really helping people to understand how the IT and OT world are converging, how they're getting blurred, and then what do we do with this data. That partnership comes in the form of the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee Connected Systems Institute, which, full disclosure, I serve on their advisory board. I have for several years. Huge fan of the CSI and the work that's being done there, without question. Tell us about your partnership, Microsoft's that is, with the Connected Systems Institute, what you're seeking to accomplish. I believe you're the single largest investor in that amazing program in Southeast Wisconsin.
Yeah, I agree with you. It is an amazing program. I've been a big fan of a lot of these industrial cooperations with the universities, and obviously getting to our students in terms of manufacturing is exciting. There is high-tech technology in manufacturing.
Right.
And it's not kind of an old school mentality. It's an industry it's transforming. So it's an exciting time, and that transformation is uncomfortable for more experienced folks.
Yep.
But that creates opportunity for folks that are just starting their career. So I'm pretty excited about that. So in terms of our relationship with the program, yes, we were investors, but we also help with providing technology and providing some resources to help with the training and disseminating of the content. And by the way, that experience isn't just valuable for the receiving students, it also helps ground some of our Microsoft folks in delivering some of the content, because sometimes we get trapped in our own technology world and forget that there's a physical world out there as well.
Absolutely. So understanding cyber-physical systems, and really in a great microcosm, I think, at the Connected Systems Institute, where you can get your hands on, whether it's Rockwell Automation Factory Talk, whether it's advanced analytics software from Microsoft, robots from Fanuc. I mean, these amazing partners that are involved in that organization, really bringing down to earth all of these technologies, how they're changing manufacturing, and then going from there into the world of how do we then take, to your point, people working going on at the Connected Systems Institute. I actually met one of your colleagues at the Connected Systems Institute for the first time. It was about 3 years ago, and he was presenting on Microsoft's advancements into the world of smart sensors and smart devices, and how all of that technology was transforming its entire business model. That individual was Brad Smith, who Enrique knows is the president of Microsoft. Had an opportunity to meet Mr. Smith at that event. One of the things that he said to us was that by the year 2025, so this is a couple years ago, we got 3 years to go, by the year 2025, 2.7 billion devices will be connected to the internet, which just exploded my brain when he said that. It's always stuck in my mind when I talk to people about where all this is going in manufacturing. That's a huge point that we make, Enrique, is about all this connectivity, what we call Industry 4.0, the fourth industrial revolution. There's all kinds of buzzwords that float around in relationship to that: artificial intelligence, machine learning, IIoT, blockchain, predictive maintenance. I want to turn the sights now on actually a platform that we've heard about a couple times this morning since we stepped into our meeting, and that being Microsoft Azure. And how is Azure bringing these terms to life for manufacturers?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in terms of offering, I see the cloud capability helping kind of scale out some of those solutions, not just with the computing horsepower, like I described earlier,
Right.
but the ability to disseminate those best practices across multiple factories.
Okay.
So we see a lot of the pilot purgatory, and we see the cloud enabling the ability to kind of roll that out. And also, we also recognize that it's an iterative process. So if you need to go back and update or tweak, right, you have that flexibility with an Azure and a cloud infrastructure.
Sure.
So
if I am a company that is looking at how do we take Azure and put it to work in manufacturing, and we talk a lot about large companies, Visteon, we talk about large automotive companies, huge companies like Microsoft, we've already mentioned companies like Fanuc, Rockwell Automation, these are the big players, lots of small to mid-sized businesses that are deploying these technologies as well. Say I'm a tier 2, tier 1 supplier to a company like Stellantis, for lack of a better example, and I've got to figure out how to use a platform like Azure to improve my operations. Where does somebody like that start on that journey?
that's very interesting, right? Because I'm a big fan of the auto suppliers.
Okay, I'm sure in your time at Visteon with that experience as well, right?
That's right. So, I mean, the auto OEMs would have large vehicle factories and powertrain factories.
Right.
And you look at the supplier kind of part of the value chain, it winds up being many medium and small size factories.
Right.
So you actually get higher quantities of factories, right? And then you don't have necessarily the staff to be able to support these solutions.
Right.
So therefore, leveraging from kind of a central environment is very powerful. And the concept of software as a service and deploying that, obviously very helpful in those tier 1, tier 2 supplier conversations. A perfect example being here at Automation Fair, I'm a big fan of the Plex acquisition from Rockwell.
You bet, yeah.
From a cloud manufacturing execution system. Because again, right, it helps from lifting the infrastructure from on-premise.
Right.
It helps with that rolling out capability, but also updating as some of the requirements and legislation changes.
Yeah, I was at I'm too a big fan of the Plex acquisition. In fact, I think we've got a guest from Plex joining us. It's either this afternoon or tomorrow. I think it's later this afternoon. I was I had signed like 6 NDAs to get into this manufacturing plant I was in about 15 years. Found ways to automate those, to drive out waste, to drive out potentially dangerous careers or people that may be put in harm's way because of the types of jobs that they had. Made those jobs a lot more efficient through technology, and then had all of their information going up to their MES, which in this case was Plex, and really, really fascinating to see at the cloud level all of the data that they were gathering, all the real-time data visualization that was taking place in that manufacturing floor. So you could go just about anywhere and see what was happening, not only at the particular point of production, but anywhere else in the supply chain in real time. All that data was flowing in real time, and I think for small to mid-sized manufacturers, and as I mentioned, I was one. I was tier 1 to, at the time, Chrysler, now Stellantis. I was tier 1 to GM. I was tier 1 to Honda. I was tier 1 to Toyota for a long time. Tier 1 for our listeners who may not be familiar, meaning that is your customer. So you're tier 1 to automotive. You're supplying directly to the automotive company. Tier 2 would supply a tier 1 supplier, and so on. And in those days, it was just phenomenal to watch how quickly automotive worked and all of the data that was required to be successful. And now here we are 10, 15, 20 years later, and it's stepped up in ways that people, I think, have a hard time even comprehending how important data is in the execution of manufacturing.
Absolutely.
Same thing?
Absolutely. So I'm a big fan of the data discussion.
Yep.
So throughout my career, I did spend 8 years at OSI Soft out in California.
Okay.
Time series data, higher fidelity data. And
Yeah.
I think that it's great that we're starting to see that real-time situational awareness that a Plex can deliver.
Right.
But we're also seeing the Internet of Things technology
Right.
enabling additional data coming in.
For sure.
And also some of that higher fidelity, high frequency data that lives within the machine that can help you create more sophisticated models and tools that we're seeing today.
Yep.
And so therefore, when we go to customers and they say, hey, Microsoft, Enrique, we already have a lot of data. And I'm like, do you have all the data?
Right.
And it's like, no, there's more data in your environment that you need. You can't predict an outcome by just knowing the result.
Right.
You need to know what made up that result.
Absolutely.
And so that's where, when we look at the automation data, alarms, time series data, even in a discrete manufacturing world,
Right.
that image data, you start talking about unstructured data, and by that I mean documents and manuals to help repair the machine.
Sure.
If you're a frontline worker and you're bombarded with all of this data,
Right.
and you're trying to get the line running, I mean, that's gotta harmonize somehow. Otherwise,
Absolutely.
you're just hurting the frontline worker. Instead of
Exactly.
helping them.
Well, you're hurting the frontline worker. You're hurting your ability to produce products on time and to produce quality products. You're hurting your profitability as an enterprise because you're missing opportunities to reduce waste, to reduce costs, and ultimately you're going to limit your ability to grow or maintain your current customers because somebody's going to figure out how to do that more effectively, faster, better quality, more features and benefits, whatever, using smart technology, and then you are watching the world pass you by because as a small to mid-sized manufacturer, somebody else jumped the game on you and figured out how to put these things to work. So such an exciting time in the world of manufacturing, and I'm now 6-7 years out of day-to-day running or being responsible for manufacturing operations. I tell you, I don't miss the call at the 3 o'clock in the morning saying the line went down. You got to come into the plant.
Oh, yeah.
I don't miss that. I've had that call and worse. But I do miss a little bit being out there in the middle of the manufacturing world as all of these solutions are coming online and all the tools that manufacturers have available to them. To that point, as we're walking around Automation Fair, and I don't know what time you got here, but had maybe half a day to walk around and see some really kind of cool, blow your mind technology. I certainly saw some as we were walking around earlier today. What are some of the things, Enrique, that you've seen during your time here that are like, wow, that is really, really cool?
I wouldn't say it's about the sizzle and the exciting tech. The concept that really excites me is the notion of not just using this data and all these systems for improving operations, is a whole sustainability discussion.
Interesting.
That our kids are obviously going to live into.
Right.
And so therefore understanding that it's not just traditional energy consumption and optimizing through continuous improvement,
Right.
but it's also looking at kind of the greenhouse gas emissions of the scope 1 emissions of a factory,
Sure.
but also looking at scope 3 emissions throughout the supply chain.
Mhm.
And I say that because as I was talking to the lady on the greenhouse gas and sustainability initiatives at Rockwell,
Right.
we recognize that those are challenging problems, right, in terms of the greenhouse gas emissions that your suppliers produce,
Right.
that your utilities produce in giving you that energy, and the telemetry of your products as they live out in their life cycle, and the whole circularity discussion. So to me, it's very interesting seeing that coming to the top of the agenda,
Right.
especially with our customer base being kind of younger and millennials and being very conscious on that topic.
Right.
And to see that kind of start to blend in with the traditional nuts and bolts manufacturing optimization.
Yeah, it really is blending in the whole idea of sustainability, blending into the conversation around manufacturing technology. You're exactly right. The next generation of workers, at least a lot of them, are asking those kind of questions. We interview them when we're hiring them for our companies, and
Right.
those are questions you never got 15 years ago, ever. I don't think running a manufacturing company, I don't think I got that question once, and now it's routinely at the top of mind of young people as they think about not just where their career is going to go and what that means for them financially, but also are they working for an organization that shares their values? Are they working for an organization that they can be proud to say, this is where I work? And what we tell manufacturers, Enrique, with all of these things is it's an and, not an or. I mean, it's like, am I sustainable or am I efficient? Well, look, if you can find a way to reduce energy consumption on a manufacturing production line, you are simultaneously going to reduce energy cost, reduce energy consumption. You're going to be better at attracting that next generation of talent. And, oh, by the way, less greenhouse gases. And so it's an and, not an or. And I think it's a really exciting time to be having that conversation.
I think wonderful companies that are here, Rockwell, Microsoft, etc., PTC. I think we're leading by example.
Exactly.
Right? And I think that's very, very exciting as we bring new people into the workforce and recognize that, hey, this matters to us. And I'm really excited about that.
One of the things that we tell young people when they're deciding on a career is, look, every company has its own culture, its own set of core values. Every individual has the same thing. We call it your personality. We call it your personal values. And they don't necessarily have to be right or wrong, but they need to be aligned. So you can have one set of values or another set of values, and they can both be fine, but they have to be aligned. And so as we counsel companies that are considering how they morph themselves into being able to attract the next generation of talent, so you got to be really, really intentional about what is your mission. Be really intentional about what are those values that drive your business. Communicate them to potential employees, and then interview around them as you're hiring people. People are successful in positions because of that culture fit, because values are aligned. And so it's just a great tool for making sure that we're driving our organizations forward. When we think about values being aligned, when we think about this whole idea of what our young people should be thinking about as they plan for their futures, what, Enrique, would you have as advice for, let's say, a high school sophomore who is considering their future, and the future of their career, the future of where they're going from an education standpoint? If you had one piece of advice for that individual, what would it be, Enrique Herrera?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny because I have teenagers at home, so this sounds like a dinner table conversation.
Yeah, I love it.
And in terms of, there's a lot of kind of stress and unknowns and fear of making the right decisions. And I think one of the keys, at least in my career, as I studied as a mechanical engineer at MIT.
Yeah.
Even though I live in Michigan, a different M school.
Yeah, great.
And as a mechanical engineer, evolving through manufacturing in information technology and in software, and so my advice to folks, the students, would be, pick a direction and keep building on it. Remain agile.
Right.
And kind of don't stop learning.
Absolutely.
Right? That's my advice.
Yeah, remain agile and don't stop learning. I think especially now when people think about their careers, and it's different. I mean, when I graduated from high school, a lot of my parents' friends had, they had started with a company 30 years before, and they were still working there, right? I mean, you had your career, and that was it. Kind of morphed over the time that maybe we were coming of age, and now it's, it's really about your career choice isn't a life sentence, right? It is. And as I told my kids, they're a little bit older than yours, but not much. I said, look, they put so much pressure on themselves about what is going to be am I going to go direct to workforce? Am I going to go to technical or community college? Am I going to go to a 4-year university? What am I going to major in? What is my career choice going to be? And it's like, what I told our kids is, look, make the best decision you can. It's not a life sentence. And whatever your decision is, that's your decision. And then just don't look back. Just keep going and keep pushing ahead. And to your point, be flexible over the course of time and be a lifelong learner. I think that is the biggest thing. We're in an age of technology now where, you can no longer just have an education pathway, know what you know, go into the workforce and rest on that for the next 30 years. You may not be able to even rest on it for the next 5 years. So I think that's really, really good advice that you give.
I think that, I encourage my kids to follow their passion. As much as I would like them to follow my career path, right? They're looking at other things, right? They're looking at, video content development, looking at kind of some of the social services. And I'm like, just follow your passion.
Absolutely.
And keep building on that.
Yep, exactly. Keep building. I think that is a really, really good piece of advice. Microsoft is continuing to build, obviously, new products, new applications, new markets, and this whole world of advanced manufacturing and the applications there that, we know you've been deeply involved there, Enrique, for a long time, but letting our listeners hear about just how deeply involved and how you see the future of advanced manufacturing continuing to evolve into the future. It's been a really, really fascinating conversation with Enrique Herrera. He is the Director of Industry Solutions Automotive at Microsoft. Enrique, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me.